Okay, so this video will probably go up before some of the others I've been doing, just to try to give a little bit of space in between some of the videos that I've done. I've gotten a lot of HershNoeie questions back to back, so I wanted to put this one in there to kind of break that up a little bit. Definitely don't mind the Ask HershNoeies, but I wanted to talk about this one, this particular video, because it really is something that I get asked quite often, especially when it comes to Tacoma and mobility and parking and all of that. Downtown Tacoma, along with really all of Tacoma, is seeing a major transformation. And, there was a video I posted that talked about how now the hottest market in the country is in Tacoma. And that's not really a shock for people who are in this area. I think some people are kind of shocked. Because they just never thought that it would be Tacoma. But for others, it makes sense, right? The quality of life here is pretty good. And you couple that with, excuse me, you couple that with affordable homes and affordable retail space, and it makes good sense. There's a lot of things the city is doing great, and there's some other things that are a little bit of cause for concern, and hopefully the city will address those things before it gets too late. Well, one of the concerns is involving transportation. Now, going from here to Seattle can be a bit of a challenge, depending upon the time of day and the day of the week. For those who are daily commuters, it's becoming more and more of a challenge. Now, we do have obviously I-5 that runs from here up through all the way up to the Canadian border, and it gets very backed up. That gets old quick. Some people love cars and they don't mind sitting and waiting in traffic all day. That's not my thing. The other option would be to take public transport. You have express buses that will take you from here up to Seattle, but again, you're sitting in traffic. You're not having to drive, but one thing can go wrong and then you're basically going to be late for work, right? The other option, and it's much more limited, is going to be Sounder commuter train. Now, the Sounder commuter train, the South Line is the busiest, and it will get you there all the way right into the King Street station downtown. But that has its own issues because it's slow. It's slower. Of the three ways to get there, probably this might take the longest, depending upon if the interstate has an accident on it, then the train might be faster. The other option that's hopefully coming soon, and of course we're talking about ferries and things like that, fast ferries that will get you there. Hopefully that will continue. But the one thing that we know that has the money for it, that is pretty much about 10 to 11 years away, is the light rail train from Seattle coming down to Tacoma. Okay? This is something that's extremely important for the life of the South Sound. We really and truly cannot handle any more people on the interstate. And you're starting to see the wear and tear. You're starting to see a lot of different things happen. What we also are seeing too is where they're going to put the station stops in Tacoma, it's getting a lot more attention, a lot more development, right? So if you go to our website, which is in the description box below, it will show you where they're planning to put stations, right, for the future light rail down here. And there's going to be 4 stops after Federal Way, and 2 of them are going to be right in Tacoma, right? So you have one, I think, that's in Fife, which is a town right next to Tacoma. And then you have one that's actually in Tacoma, and then another one right by the Tacoma Dome, where all of the transit options are. To me, there's been a lot of, I'm going to give my take on this, but there's been a lot of take on what they should do. There's so many different routes and options that they can take and all that type of stuff. And Sound Transit's looking for the public to talk about it. Now, the powerful folks are saying these are some of the things that we want happen. One of the things that's come up recently is the fact that this should be an underground station, right, at the Tacoma Dome. Okay? Now, it's not going to be where you actually have a tunnel boring system. You know, the typical subway has a boring system that tunnels through. And so basically it's the slow thing that just kind of is a big giant drill, if you will. And it basically puts the concrete panels on the side of the tube. And so it, as it goes along, and it's great, but it's slow and it's expensive. Each one of those machines, after they get done with the project, has to be dismantled. So it's a very expensive, I mean, like once they take it out of the hole, it has to be dismantled before they can ever even use it again, right? They have to completely redo it. It's a very expensive process and it takes a while. And we're used to projects here now that have to use a tunneling system, some sort of a boring system to just bore through the earth. And those are kind of controversial because we've had a lot of projects here that have been delayed because of that. Our soil conditions here are very unique. You're around a lot of water. You have a lot of, soft soil. So there's earthquakes are here. There's so many different things that you have to really consider. Now there's another option which is called cut and cover, where they basically just cut down into the earth and they build everything they need to do. It's not as deep of a tunnel. The station is not as deep, but they then cover it after they've built everything in, and so it's called cut and cover. And it's a lot cheaper to do. You have a lot of advantages over that as far as construction, because it's a lot faster, a lot cheaper, a lot more practical, a lot less disruptive. When they're boring under the earth, sometimes it creates many vibrations. It's kind of like small earthquakes as it go along. So any buildings that are in the area are going to feel that. And it could sometimes create structural damage, right? It's just, whereas cut and cover, not so much. It's just literally cutting into the earth, building that up, and doing what they have to do. In fact, they do a lot of cut and cover projects, even when they're building transit stations up in Seattle. But that's not what this video is really about. It's more about, should they actually do a subway style station underground in Tacoma? And I think that they should. Here's the two options that I think. If you go to the Tacoma Dome now, right now, if they built it today, you could have it elevated, which is what their plan is to basically have an elevated track that runs from here all the way up past Federal Way, which is another city outside of Tacoma, all the way up, right? Now, in Bellevue, it's going underground, right? In Seattle, you have some underground. And of course, the thing that's been told is that, well, in Seattle, there's so much development, you have to go underground. And when you're going to Bellevue, they say the same thing. We have so many big buildings going through downtown, you have to go underground. Now, that's not necessarily true in Bellevue's case. You could probably go around the city a little bit, downtown a little bit, and keep it above ground. You technically could. I mean, that's just the facts. The reason why it's put underground and it was not argued with is because money. People over there have a lot of money. There's a lot of corporate bigwigs over there too. So Subway looks better, makes them seem a little bit more sophisticated, as opposed to having a above ground track above you. And it would be much worse if you had an at grade system, right? But nobody wants to really say that. They want to say, well, it has to be done. It has to be underground. And meanwhile, folks like myself and other folks here in Pierce County, as well as Snohomish County, are paying for this system. Now, that's not to say that folks in Bellevue aren't, but you have a smaller city that has a lot of importance getting a subway system just because. In Tacoma, we really and truly have a lot of land restrictions because we have a lot of water. We have Commencement Bay, which is going to restrict us in a lot of growth patterns. We have a lot of homes, single-family homes, which kind of constrict growth. So a lot of your big development is going to have to be downtown. You also have tribal land, so the Puyallup Tribe of Indians, which is also voicing, their opinions about this project, also have a big area too. So Tacoma doesn't have a lot of space to go. It can't really go out. You have other cities that ring around Tacoma, so it can't really expand. So development now for the city, there's no more annexation. The only annexation they could do is along Ruston. So up on the north side of the city, There's a town called Ruston, which is literally like a 1 square mile city. It's very tiny. And there was talk about annexing them a while back. It didn't happen, but it was going to happen. And so that's the only place that you could technically do some annexation and grow the city. But it wouldn't really grow much, you know? Other than that, that's it. So you have to build up. The Dome District of Tacoma, when we're talking about downtown, is the least developed. When we're talking about, you see a lot of open spaces, you see a lot of old warehouses. Some are active, some are not. There's a lot of big chunks of land down there where you could technically build up. If you were to build an underground station, you allow for more transit-oriented development. You allow for more apartments. You allow for more parks. You allow for more building structures, different things like that, as opposed to having a station, whether it is an elevated station or an at-grade above-ground station. They take up a lot of space. When you look at Sound Transit, they have built 3 and 4 buildings for a station, right? Now, they're not going to spend much money in Tacoma. They're just basically doing what the least that they have to do, to be honest with you. And they're putting a station here. They're putting 2 stops here, right? They basically want to get away with putting just a elevated station and calling it quits. However, recently, Tacoma, since, you know, the whole idea of coming to Tacoma many years ago, I forget how many years they said it was, but many years ago, Tacoma wasn't really that hot. The idea of connecting Tacoma was basically just to say that we have a connection to our far-flung cities. Now you have a city that is pretty hot. I mean, Tacoma is becoming a destination. So now, with everything tilting this direction, where Tacoma is now becoming more of a family-oriented city over Seattle, it always kind of has been. It's much more affordable than Seattle. You have a lot of the same creature comforts that you do up in Seattle. You know, it is a city that has a big museum district. It has a lot of other things going for it. The arts, I mean, like, we've funded a huge arts program, which is something Seattle doesn't have. None of it existed back in the day when they were considering to come down to Tacoma. Now you have a city that probably will be, in 2020, which is next year, the second largest city in the state. Right now, Spokane beats Tacoma by just a couple of thousand. So more than likely, there's a good chance that Tacoma could edge out Spokane and be the second largest city in the entire state. Now, with that said, and with the fact that the Dome District has the most available area to build up in a city that's growing very fast, it would make a lot of sense to put a station underground. In fact, both stations should be underground, in my opinion. The one station, is close to the new casino that's going in. That's a massive casino. So when you look at it, even though it's going to cost a little bit more, I think you're better served having those 2 stops in Tacoma to be underground. Especially, if not the one by the Tacoma Dome should be underground. Absolutely. Now, they're not going to do that probably. But if they do consider to build a station above ground and it's elevated, it should definitely be incorporated into Freight House Square. The Freight House Square is a very iconic building here in Tacoma. It's kind of like a little mall. It's kind of like it's not a real mall, but it kind of is. It's got a lot of mom and pop places in there. It's not used a lot of places to go eat and things like that. But you can catch the Sounder train there and Amtrak and all that type of stuff, right? To me, Sound Transit should incorporate Freight House Square somehow into the station. It shouldn't be where people have to do a whole lot of walking over tracks and everything else to get to the station, which I think that's what they're trying to get away with. The city should make them either put basically dig an underground tunnel from Freight House over to the transit stop so that people can go underground and get from Freight House over to that. That would make a lot of sense. Keep in mind, the Dome District area hosts a huge amount of events. We have the Tacoma Dome itself hosts a lot of concerts, big names that come through. A lot of cities come here at the Dome. You're getting a lot of traffic from different people to see concerts. So that area to me should be as pedestrian friendly as possible, right? It shouldn't be where people have to jump and hopscotch over rail tracks because Sound Transit wants to make it as affordable for them as possible. But yet, and I understand affordability, I agree. But when you're spending so much money at some of these other places that don't really need it, and you're basically giving us the rough end of the stick, I just disagree with that. Sure, we do have the Tacoma Link. I get that. But I think it would be much better to have a station. If you're not going to put everything underground and incorporate it with the existing Tacoma Link as well as Freight House Square, at least have a tunnel, put Freight House Square as being one of the main, it could actually serve itself as one of the main transit facility, because it already kind of is, and have it where folks can go under a underground tunnel all the way over to the platform that's going to be up above ground. To me, that makes a lot of sense, as opposed to what I think they're going to try to do. But there's a lot of time between now and then. But it seems like there is a possibility that the station could be underground. Now, I'm saying with a possibility, we're probably talking low percentage at this point. I don't expect a lot coming from Sound Transit, to be honest with you. I think that they don't really take Tacoma that seriously, and you get that as an outsider, and I consider myself an outsider. No one in this region really takes Tacoma that seriously. And so I think now we're seeing a big shift, but I don't expect them to really do much in terms of the best interest for Tacoma. We'll see. We will see. But, to put it into perspective, I think the original light rail, I can't remember when it was built, but it was built back in, 2003 or so? And we're just now getting an extension to Hilltop. We won't get another extension out to the community college until the year 2041. So and this is all streetcar. It gives you an idea where their priorities are. It's definitely not in Tacoma, even though we've had a lot of stuff. To put it into perspective, the route that they're going to go from once they finish the Hilltop area and they're going to the community college, just that stretch from 19th Street all the way to community college has a whole new bunch of set of circumstances that didn't exist before. One, the right there by the stadium, the Rainier Stadium, which I actually went to, Cheney Stadium. They're building a soccer-specific stadium there, which hosts two teams, one of which is a professional soccer team, the other semi-professional. And it's also going to build a huge village there. I talked about that, right? So that wasn't part of the equation when Sound Transit planned the extension all the way out to TCC. The other thing is the city has actually started a project too near TCC that will deal with a lot of the housing issues. It's a big project that they're working on that is to address a lot of the housing affordability issues. It's kind of like our mini micro Yesler Terrace, and we're talking actual buildings here. So that is something that Sound Transit wasn't aware of. To me, the project should be moved up much sooner than 2041, but it's not going to happen. So couple all those different things together. I know I'm all over the place. I think the Sound Transit's not really going to do what is the right thing to do. And I think that when we're talking about the cut and cover method, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially in the Dome area, which is adding apartment buildings left and right. There's already one building that's already up. I talked about that from Cause Development. They're still working on the outside of it. It's completely, the outside structure height is done. They're working on the interior and exterior. And one of the other big projects that's going to be right there in front of Freight House Square is called Tracks. It's a huge apartment block that's going up. And again, I think that we're better served with having a station that's underground. And some people will say, I've had someone come in and say, well, it's funny how all these people come to Tacoma, they want it to grow big, and they want this, and they want that. I have a solution, go to Seattle and live. Here's my thing. I can say the same thing for people who don't want to see Tacoma grow. You can go I know plenty of places that are stagnant that you can go to, and you never have to worry about those places developing. But to basically suggest that Tacoma should just stay to a certain size to where you're comfortable is just stupid. There are so many different things that go into the reason why Tacoma is growing the way that it has. And we're finally getting the much needed recognition down here. We have some people who are butthurt because the city is actually finally growing, and that there are people who really and truly understand development. And they understand that there are certain things that should be done, right? It's about demanding more from your city leadership and saying, look, there are certain things that should be pushed. Tacoma has a good position right now because the mayor sits on the board of Sound Transit as well as other people in the county. But they have to push their position and say, look, this is what we desperately need. Bellevue's done that. The folks over in West Seattle has done that. The folks up in Ballard are doing that. We have to have people who push a point and say, this is what we desperately need. It's not necessarily a want like some of these other places. It's an actual need. We don't have the space. We're building up right there in that area where there's so much synergy already, not counting other future proposed projects. So we need to have a station that's underground. We've been waiting forever. So we really and truly are entitled, I feel, to having a station that represents the city and not just some elevated system. It's great that we're actually getting this. So it's hopefully it happens. I'm still on the fence on whether or not they're actually going to build it down this far. Once I see it happen, then I'll believe it. But so I'm thankful that we actually are getting two stations nonetheless. But I think that we still need to make sure that we push and get the best of what we can, given the fact that we've paid so much money and got very little out of it. Anyhow, hope you guys are having a great Wednesday. The week's almost over, halfway there. Hope you like this video. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.